All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle a really wild idea from Friedrich Nietzsche today. The strange, almost paradoxical, human desire for hardship. I mean, why would anyone ever crave trouble more than they crave comfort? It sounds completely backwards, but as we're about to see, Nietzsche thought this was absolutely essential for a life worth living.
So let's just put the question out there nice and simple. In a world that is obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with safety, happiness, and comfort, why on earth do we seem to go looking for trouble? Why do we actively seek out difficulty and sometimes even pain?
And boom, here's Nietzsche's answer. He believed a life of just pure, uninterrupted peace doesn't actually make us feel fulfilled. He said it makes us shrivel. What a word, right? So for him, suffering isn't just some problem to be avoided. No, it's the necessary antidote to that deep, soul-crushing boredom that comes from a life with too much stability.
Okay, so this leads us to our first big idea here. Nietzsche looked at our modern obsession with comfort, and he didn't see a triumph of civilization. He saw a problem. He saw a kind of spiritual sickness.
And this is the core paradox he pointed out. We've built these societies that are safer than ever before in history, but he argues it's come at a steep cost. A life that's too safe, too, laborious, and its constant search for more comfort leads to what he called intellectual poverty and a deep spiritual stagnation. Basically, we lose the very vitality, that spark that makes us feel truly alive. So, if being too safe is the sickness, then what's the diagnosis? Well, this brings us right to Nietzsche's core argument about this hidden, powerful hunger for hardship that we all have. He calls it the desire for suffering. Now, let's be super clear. This is not about masochism. It's not about wanting pain for pain's sake. Instead, he saw it as this primal, or atavistic drive. It's a deep, almost biological hunger for a real challenge. It's an instinct that just kicks in to reawaken our sense of power when it's been put to sleep by too much ease. And he basically laid out these two different paths in life. On one side, you have the common spirit. Its whole goal is to find security, to avoid pain at all costs. But where does that lead? Stagnation. On the other side, though, you've got the noble spirit. And this one actively seeks out danger, even tragedy. Not for their own sake, but as a tool, as a way to reignite that essential sense of power.
And for Nietzsche, this isn't just a personality type. He saw it as a biological imperative. It's a survival tactic for what he famously called the will to power, our fundamental internal drive to grow, expand, and overcome. Without a real struggle, that will just gives up. It falls into this state of what he called disgust with life itself. And that stagnation, for Nietzsche, is pretty much a kind of death. But what happens when this powerful drive has no real outlet in our safe, modern world? Well, in this next section, we're going to explore the unhealthy ways we create our own theaters of pain just to satisfy this hunger.
The idea is pretty simple. When there's no real danger, we just invent it. Nietzsche argues we become shackled by our own deep need for intensity. And so we create our own dramas, our own little conflicts and controversies, all just to feel a tiny spark of that sense of power again. So how do we do this? Nietzsche pointed to two main faulty outlets. The first he called theatrical. This is where we experience suffering from a safe distance, through art, the news, social media crusades. The second he called corrupted. And this is where that powerful drive gets channeled into what he saw as slavish moral or religious duties. You can see why this theatrical suffering is so tempting, right? It gives us that big eruption of strong emotions, the outrage, the feeling of heroism, the tragedy, but with zero of the actual wicked consequences of a real conflict. It's a quick, temporary hit of that sense of power, but ultimately, it's just a cheap, empty substitute for genuine struggle. And here's how he saw morality corrupting this same drive. You take the raw, atavistic pride of a warrior, that powerful drive to assert yourself and overcome, and institutions reframe it as a sin. This powerful, noble desire is then twisted into an obligation of self-denial and pity, which Nietzsche said effectively murders that noble instinct inside of us. So if those are the misguided cures, what's the real prescription? This brings us to Nietzsche's call for a complete reevaluation of suffering, to find its truly noble purpose. Nietzsche's goal isn't to get rid of this desire, not at all. It's to become honest about it. He wants us to consciously acknowledge this restlessness inside of us, and then redirect it. Instead of letting it become theatrical or corrupted, we can reclaim it as the raw, creative lava that actually fuels our growth. So he kind of lays out a 4-step path to what he calls self-overcoming. Step 1, acknowledge this desire for suffering is inside you. Step 2, reject the cheap, theatrical substitutes. Step 3, and this is the big one, proactively choose genuine, tough struggles that will actually force you to grow. And the ultimate goal of all this, self-overcoming.
Now, Nietzsche knew this was especially tough in the modern world. Because of what he famously called the death of God, the decline of religious authority, there's no divine judge anymore to tell us what our suffering means. Without that framework, our pain can just feel like a dangerous, nihilistic void. The job of creating meaning for our own struggles, well, that's entirely on us now.
And this brings us to the ultimate, and maybe the most challenging goal of all. It's not just to endure tragedy with a grim face, it's to become noble enough to affirm all of life, the good and the bad, with a festive spirit. It's about finding laughter, even in the middle of your own tragedy.
Okay, let's wrap this all up by looking at the challenge Nietzsche puts before us. The challenge for what he calls the free spirit, the person who truly dares to live a life beyond mere comfort.
So let's do a quick recap. Key takeaways. First, a life of pure comfort can lead to stagnation. Second, that desire for hardship is a totally natural, powerful drive. Third, we tend to misdirect this drive into fake, theatrical drama. Fourth, true dignity is found when we consciously choose our own struggles. And finally, the whole point is to turn that feeling of disgust with a boring life into a festive yes to all of life.
Ultimately, Nietzsche's ideal person is someone who doesn't just endure hardship, they actively desire the eruptions that test them. They know that this is where true vitality and the highest dignity are found. It's about having a spirit that's hard enough to welcome the storm. And that leaves us with one last provocative question to chew on. If a life of total comfort really does lead to stagnation, then what is the meaningful, chosen struggle, the noble suffering that your life might be missing?